Hell is other people. This is an interesting quote, and aside from the context, I have my own sense of meaning attached to it. For a long time, I resonated with the sentiment that others were to be guarded against and treated with suspicion. How long? A guru never tells. But how accurate is our judgment of others? And more importantly, how accurate is our understanding of ourselves? This is the topic of today: how RPGs, social media, and fiction impact our understanding of who we are and who we are not. I'm Marley, your statistical spook. Join me in an exploration of character recreation. I would like to begin by focusing on Western RPGs, and honestly, that is the core focus for this exploration. And I would like to appreciate one of the main differences that often form the root of what may be classified as so called Western RPGs versus JRPGs, despite this being a misnomer. A common framing is the focus on embodiment of a character of your own making versus taking on a role of a character who is their own person. That is to say, a predefined character. This is linked to the focus on freedom of expression and acknowledgement at the expense of stronger narrative arcs and story controls. Otherwise put, the emphasis on emergence versus authored narrative moments. I would like to focus on RPGs that have their roots in player expression and character creation. However, I will contrast with character rooted games as well. Let's use Skyrim and Fallout 3 as our main examples to begin our exploration. The character creation process is often thought of as being the beginning process. We are tasked with creating the foundation of the character that you are to embody for the rest of the game. What kind of character do you create? Is it a similar character every time? Do you create someone whom you believe is reflective of who you are? Someone who is an idealized version of yourself? Or someone who is completely different? Is it really true that the experience for many is an escape? The act of character creation is compelling, and often the appeal of these sorts of experiences share similar roots with fascination in taking personality tests, which reduce your behaviors to numerical values and then apply statistical generalizations about you. There can be a kind of comfort and validation in being known in this manner. But there's an interesting difference here, is after you assign the traits of your character, they are then translated back into behavioral effectors in the game space. And there could be some degree of parallels here, as attaching weight to the notion that you are, for instance, INFJ, could impact your behavior and aptitudes through the modification of how you understand yourself and your expectations and the meaning you grant it. But perhaps it is not as direct as the mechanical choices, with the stats and perks being very causally impactful in the game. But this is, in some ways, a kind of real life class system, whereby expectations and beliefs about the kind of person you are may, to a degree, alter your actual aptitude, giving your degree of belief, resonance, and subconscious impacts like learned helplessness. Early games, such as Wizardry, left much to the imagination besides your character's stat block. They were more easily projected upon because of this, with their characters becoming their actions and abilities. Much more freedom was left for them to be shaped by their statistical distribution, name, and class, and how they manifest as the person in your mind. With games such as modern Fallout and Skyrim, providing you with the in-depth character modifications to impact the visual appearance, it takes away from the more fuzzy, free-form projection of characters existing only as statistical blocks or pixels. It is in some ways comparable to the difference between the understanding of a character portrayal in a book, contrast with the cinematic depiction, which likely errs significantly from your interpretation sans the numerous properties that are now collapsed into possibility space. And even in the case where many people will play the rest of the game in first person, having little exposure to the experience of the character they created, there is still a large effect on the choices that are made when shaping the character. You are not only shaping the game world through statistics, but creating the frame around which everything will be distorted based on your chosen appearance. The act of character creation merely begins during the character creation phase, and it can be imagined as the genetic and experiential influences that provide the foundational predispositions of the character. So the real creation was the continual process throughout the rest of the game, and the experiences are accumulated with the behavior and appearance being molded continually by the story. As people are not islands, characters cannot be understood in a vacuum, and they are rather the unfolding of behavior in relation to others. This is the modeling of environmental impacts, and through the framing of the chosen character, the experiences of the world are given a different light. As some creators may choose to take on a name that is in jest, or take advantage of the character creation to depict a garish figure, it may take the gravity out of anything that occurs during the experience. This is especially true in games that offer cutscenes, such as in the Mass Effect series, that honor your choices and appearance. And although this is an obvious point, I believe it is in some way shedding light in the same way that we may only understand the function the neuronal region plays when there is a malfunction in that area. That is to say, the power of perceptive framing, even when people are taking it seriously. The degree that you create a character that you come to embody and operate within the confines of the system to play a role. The experiences can come to alter how you see yourself. Despite the reputation the games have as being an escape, I'd argue that this is not always the case. Not everyone will come to be invested in the actions and consequences of their character in the world. However, there is an opportunity to explore yourself in both the creation of and embodiment of a character with the freedom these games may afford. And I would argue that in the right circumstance, this can come to facilitate a kind of Jungian shadow work, revisiting the quote at the beginning that hell is other people. How do we really understand others? In many ways, our experiences of others and perception of them say more about us than them. For instance, what incites strong reaction in us may be the result of projection, as we have a discarded portion of ourselves that has been deemed unacceptable and are subconsciously distancing and demonizing it. After all, many of the strong reactions that we have in the world may be attributed to how the event is perceived and what it means about us or our core beliefs. There's a great article on Psychology Today that explores this, which I will link below, and I will discuss it further. How did you read that last word? Apologies in advance for those whom are merely listening and not looking at my cute ghost face. Some would choose close, while others close. And I love this word, or rather these types of words, as the link between them resonates with my experience. As the closer things get, so too do I feel a compulsion to close myself off. And there's the notion that creating distance from yourself and from content that you find distressing is helpful in allowing you to explore it with a more open mindset. This is the kind of distance that may be offered while taking on the role of a chosen character in an open world RPG. These experiences often last for 20 to 80 hours. This is a long time to spend in a world where your experiences and actions are impacting both the world and your character. And without the real world implications and stressors, it may come to offer space in which you can begin to explore divergencies in your lived experience with alternatives. This simultaneous distance and closeness can be a powerful way to facilitate exploration of oneself. The continual progression of the characters throughout the story unfolds both through statistical improvements and is reflected through appearance. The attainment of skills over time and the increasingly stylish and bold attire available both highlight in a positive way the possibility for change. As most characters begin as fairly incompetent, fragile individuals without means, the end of these journeys sees them grow into hyper-capable individuals who have the confidence to adorn themselves with the boldest of equipment and the capabilities to now deal with things that were before unsurmountable. This stark contrast that moves along a continuum throughout the game allows for an idealized version of reality, where putting in time and effort guarantees improvement. It may open up the possibility space and allow for a more optimistic view of what is possible for oneself in the real world, the counterbalance to pessimism. Yes, upward Uzumaki. For those who know, know. And I apologize, but the notion of spiraling upwards is very interesting to me, and it is this counterposition seeded through these sorts of experiences that I find interesting. For it is easy to be inclined to the downward spiral, at least in my experience. But the notion that you can flip that around and cause a positive cascade has been powerful to me. And personally, I have found inspiration taken from resonant experiences in video games that have positively impacted my life outside of them. For instance, early on I played a grotesque amount of games from the Mega Man franchise. Those games are my dead souls, and perhaps part of my resilience, which also may manifest as rigidity, has been formed from my continual persistence, throwing myself at the often brutal difficulty until by brute force or strategic alteration, I am able to sunder boomer cawing or whatever. But RPGs reinforce the notion that through approaching a problem from a different angle with different equipment, or by revisiting it in a while, it may eventually be overcome. With the freedom in worlds such as Fallout and Skyrim, there is an Escher-like quality that goes along with it, the off-blending of architecture in impossible configurations. This kind of thing may occur in open-world video games. By this, I mean the warping of societal pressures into malleable, pliable, and oft-felt impossible states that can exist alongside one another, moving through wastelands, murdering people for their goods, and thieving things from struggling citizens can exist alongside acts that are oftentimes hailed as making you the savior of populations. And freedom from the societal pressure and consequence isn't a dream. You are free to explore things that you may not in reality. And this freedom of exploration may provide a gateway to discover more about who you are or to recognize the part of yourself that you cannot see during your everyday experiences. Consider Twitter or Instagram, and even the many dating applications turned BFF finders. These tend to revolve around the accepting or denying of individuals based almost entirely on their image, and what people tend to post on their social media feeds is their manufactured representations. The technology to touch up oneself is built in such that it is more difficult not to tweak an image of yourself. And although there can be parallels drawn between an idealized version of yourself presented through social media and an idealized representation of yourself created to operate within a game space, there is an obvious fundamental difference here. The societal pressures and drives that influence social media presentation warp the focus such that you are entering parameters as a function of how others will see you, altering their perception of who you are. It is societal proofing and a dystopian realization. And in stark contrast, the open exploration and absence of that kind of pressure in Fallout and Skyrim make for an opportunity to focus purely on authenticity and expression, free from the pressures exerted in a real world context. When these two worlds collide, they take the form of MMORPGs. These two things come together to create a unique confluence of pressures. In this situation, it may offer an opportunity to opt in to the experience that is increasingly similar to the real world experience. In other words, you may exist upon a spectrum where you may tend towards a more anonymous existence, more known to others you encounter to varying degrees. This alters the experience greatly as it toggles the societal pressure levels in many respects. What actions, pursuits, and manifest expression that you find appropriate or that come into your mind in serious consideration will be swayed by the importance of your character and your degree of real life transparency. If you choose to remain fairly anonymous in this setting, it may provide a space where you can fully exist as a secondary character, which may allow for the garnering of experiences and expression outside the bounds safe to explore in your actual life. When considering RPGs that are still fairly open world, but have a focus on the player engaging in the role of a strongly predefined character, there is still an opportunity for exploration of the self through the vicarious experiences of the character. This may be an even greater way to provide distance in a way that facilitates the exploration of identity in a way that does not feel safe. Here, it is closer to that of a movie or novel. While you are able to make choices that shift in some ways the character, it generally involves the alteration of a subset of traits within an otherwise unmoving set of defined characteristics. The degrees of freedom are lessened. But if the experiences and character arc resonate serendipitously with the player, that may come to serve as a strong anchor in which the character becomes in some way internalized and may form a context-sensitive wellspring. This differentiates it from the experience of the embodiment of a character, which is more akin to the externalization of some part of yourself in order to remove built-in judgment and reflection upon it in a different context. These are not completely isolated, but it seems there is a strong argument for predisposition in both cases. The digital age has offered ways in which there are continually new opportunities to understand ourselves and others. With the ubiquity of internet aliases, generative avatars, and the blending of reality with fantasy through technology, the way in which we may understand who we are and how we understand others is being greatly altered. Our understanding of how things work and technology are bidirectionally connected. We used to attribute the source of life to elements, and the elements to deities. We built computational systems and cameras inspired by studying neurology and ocular physiology. Then technology normalized throughout society, and things such as computer hardware, software, and cinematic framing came to offer new ways in which to understand thought processes, consciousness, and perception. There have been many attempts to apply gamification to real life, and real life as an influence by the design of games. This messy interconnection of technology and our understanding of ourselves is relentlessly intertwined, and we are defined in many ways by our continual technological advancements. It has been so throughout the existence of humanity that we have come to understand ourselves through art. We can realize and accept through storytelling the things that our minds are resilient against denying in other circumstances. We evolved to be societal creatures, with storytelling being an integral part of knowledge transfer. And the power of fiction can take the most ineffable of things and make them paradoxically expressive messages that we can share with one another. This is my experience when creating poetry. I have often found it extremely difficult to express myself, and through poetry and creative writing, I have found the most success in externalizing my more complex thoughts and feelings. Well, I guess that is arguable, as I am not always as clear as I believe I am in the moment. But I accept that there are many ways in which to improve, and I'm trying to be open and curious about it. Whatever your experiences are at this point in time, it is my belief that it is never too late to engage in New Game Plus, so to speak. Don't feel like you are stuck on the path you are currently on. We are subject to the whims of fate, and all that is external is uncontrollable. And so whatever happens, we may not alter it, but we may alter how we perceive it. As in the aforementioned Psychology Today article, there is the notion of the identity matrix, which I find is so great. It is not dissimilar to the method of providing distance in the way media may offer. I encourage you to read the article. But it is generally talking about the notion that an event does not impact you. It is the way in which you process an event and define the meaning of it in terms of what it says about you. There is an identity matrix that exists, becoming more complex and entangled throughout life. And by appreciating things in this light, the reframing of things and focus on tranquility and acceptance may be more readily accessible. Switch your class, start a new game, pick up new equipment. I'm Marley, and this has been the Branching PathCast. If my ghoulish guise intrigues you, please check out Spirit Summoner Chanharu via her Instagram link in the description below. I'm fairly green at this, but I hope to progress. Perhaps hint of magenta, maybe ginger line if I'm feeling sassy. Please take care.